Hi friends, welcome to Naresh IT YouTube channel. My name is Nataraj. In this video, I am going to talk what is MVC and what is the role of Spring and Hibernate frameworks in the development of what? MVC architecture based web applications. You know that MVC means Model View Controller. MVC means Model View Controller. M for model, V for view, C for controller. And as I said, it is industry's de facto standard to develop web application. That means it is not officially announced anywhere. This architecture should be followed to develop web application, but most of the people in the industry follows this architecture while developing Java based web application. In fact, any other technology based web application. So that's why you can see struts is given based on MVC architecture. Spring is having Spring MVC module to develop what? MVC architecture based application. JSF is based on MVC. In ASP.NET also they got something called ASP.NET MVC to develop what? MVC architecture application. You may ask me that I have used a term called de facto standard. What do you mean by de facto standard? Not officially declared anywhere, but everyone follows it. Anyone who wants to develop a quite good web application, quite a large scale web application, people generally thinks about following what? This MVC architecture. This what? MVC architecture. It's something like this. Currently in India, Prime Minister is Mr. Modi. Ex-Prime Minister is what? Manmohan Singh. At that time, everyone used to say, though Prime Minister is Manmohan Singh, but that time our de facto Prime Minister is what? Sonia Gandhi. So that means not officially declared anywhere, but everyone seriously follows what? Okay, that particular model or architecture to develop the application. So let us try to understand the basics of what? MVC. Okay, M for model. Model. This model talks about what? Business logic plus persistence logic. Model basically talks about business logic. Actually model means data, but generally this data comes because of what? Business logic and persistence logic. M for model. Model speaks about what? Data. Generally this data comes because of business logic and persistence logic. For explanation purpose, I call model is like accounts officer. It is like accounts officer. It is like what? Accounts officer. V for view. View represents what? Presentation logic. Yeah. The logic that provides user interface either to supply inputs to application or to display outputs to end user after formatting the results is called as what? Presentation logic. So it is like beautician. It is like beautician. C for controller. So controller represents what? Integration logic. Integration logic. That means it won't do anything specifically, but it is capable of controlling and monitoring all the logics of the application. It controls and monitors various operations in the application. Its main responsibility is takes requests from what? Client. Passes those requests to what? Model layer component. That means business component. Gather results from those business component and passes those results to what? View layer component, nothing but JSP kind of thing. So it won't do anything specifically, but it is responsible to control and monitor all the activities of the application. To control and monitor all the activities of the application. So takes request, passes to model layer component, I mean it's a business component, gather results from business components and passes those results to what? View layer components. So that's why this logic is integration, because of this layer logic only all layers will be integrated with each other. That's why it is called as what? Integration. Integration logic. It is like supervisor. Tell me, what is the work of supervisor? It is like supervisor. Tell me, what is the work of supervisor here? Supervisor work is not to work hard, not to work hard. His work is to make others to work hard. His work is to make what? Others to work hard. For example, team leader is there or project leader is there. They never seriously code, but they make others to code. Once code is given, they try to what? Assemble the code, or they try to monitor the code. So that's why supervisor, traffic police, all these are what? Real life example for controller. Traffic police also stands in the central and controls what? Traffic that is happening in a X road. It's a crossroad kind of thing. So MVC, model view controller. Fine. Let us observe various permutations and combinations. What here? Various permutations and combinations that are possible with what? That are possible with various technologies and frameworks to develop MVC architecture based application. No doubt here, MVC architecture promotes layered application development. Because of that, parallel development is possible. Instead of writing all logics in one class, one component, better to write what? Multiple logics in multiple places. Due to this, parallel development is possible. How so? I can give each layer to set of programmer, they will concentrate on developing those logics. So generally in real time, what happens? Model and view layer, model layer logic, and means business logic and persistence logic will be taken care by one set of programmers. View and controller logics can be taken care by what? Another set of programmers. Since both these programmers can work parallelly, I can say definitely parallel development is what? Possible. I can say definitely what is possible? Parallel development. Moreover, we are not mixing up all the logic so that you will get clean separation between logics. Presentation logic in separate component, integration logic in separate component, and model like business logic and persistence logic in different separate component. So because of this, you will get clean separation between logics. So the modification done in one logic does not affect in what? Other logics. Okay. So let's see various permutation and combinations, various technologies and frameworks, permutation and combination to develop MVC architecture based web application. MVC architecture based web application. So we use JSP, nice, servlet. It talks with what? Java class. Very initial days here. In the initial days, around 2000, 2001, 2002, people used to follow this combination to develop what? MVC architecture based web application. Java class. This Java class talks with database software. Yeah, JSP represents V. V means what? View. Servlet represents controller. Yes. Java class represents what? Model. Java class represents what? Model. In this Java class only people used to write what? Business logics and persistence logic. After a few days, okay, people realized only Java classes not enough to write business logic and persistence logic. Especially, there is no provision to apply middleware services. Secondary logics like security, logging, auditing, this kind of what? Aspect logic or secondary logic or middleware services with the support of Java classes. They need a separate environment for that. So for that purpose, they started looking towards what? EJB. EJB means Enterprise Java Beans. What means here? Enterprise Java Beans. So for few days, they have developed MVC architecture by using what? Servlet. Here what? EJB component. EJB component. Database software. That means in one EJB component only they used to write both business logic and what? Persistence logic. Here view, here what? Controller, here what? Model. This EJB component contains both business logic and persistence logic, especially session bean. So we know that EJB is having three types of components. We have session bean components, we have entity bean components, we have message driven bean component. They used to take the support of session bean. There only they have written what? Both business logic and persistence logic. After few days, but what's the advantage? Yes, we can start working with middleware services. Not only we can write regular business and persistence logic, we can apply what? Middleware services like security, transaction management, login, especially transaction management is great. So let me spend some time on these middleware services. They are not minimum logics of application development. They are not primary logics. They are secondary. If they're fine, if not there also no problem. Sometimes you want to enable, sometimes you want to disable. Such logics are called middleware services, also called as secondary logics. Security is applied, application gets the protection. Not applied, still application runs, but protection will not be there. Logging keeps track of application flow. If not there also application runs. Such logics are called middleware services. Yes, while working with session bean component or EasyAB component, definitely we can enjoy what? Those middleware services. That's right. After few days, people have decided to separate business logics from persistence logic. People have decided to separate business logic from persistence logic. In fact, persistence logic from what? Business logic. So for that purpose, they have come up with the idea called JSP. Here is what? Servlet. Here is what? EasyAB session bean. Then we got one more thing called EasyAB entity bean. Then we got database software. Then we got something called database software. If you look at this combination, JSP acts as view, Servlet acts as what? Controller. EasyAB session bean, no doubt, model only, but it represents what? Business logic. Model means data, actually data, but some part of industry calls, since the data comes because of business logic and persistence logic, that's why they call it as model as what? Business logic plus persistence logic. This is what? Another thing. What is this? Persistence logic. Nice. Then we got, but people started feeling EasyAB is a heavyweight, especially entity beans, they have become horrible. You don't believe, to just insert one record, we need to write 400 lines of code. Based on that code, EasyAB container generates another 2-3 lines of code. Overall, it has become quite heavy to work with what? EasyAB entity beans. What here? EasyAB entity beans. That's why they decided to replace EasyAB entity bean with the ordinary JDBC code by taking separate Java class. By taking separate Java class, they want to write in an ordinary JDBC code. So for few days, this combination is gone. JSP, Servlet, here is what? EasyAB session bean. Yes, here we got Java class having JDBC code, and in fact people calls this class as what? DAO. Because if persistence logic is separated from business logic, we don't mind calling that class as what? DAO. The class that contains persistence logic separated from what? Other logics of the application is called as what? DAO. So in fact, here entity bean represents DAO. Here this Java class having JDBC code represents DAO. Data access object. The Java class that separates persistence logic from other logics of the application and makes that persistence logic flexible to modify and makes that persistence logic reusable is called as what? DAO. DAO means data access object. So for a few days this combination went well, no doubt in that. So in this combination, as usually JSP represents view, Servlet represents controller, session bean represents model having what? Business logic. Java class represents what? Model having Java class with JDBC code represents persistence logic. Let's see some more combination. But when this is going on, okay, struts have come into the market, and people started migrating to struts to develop what? View and controller layer, especially web application. So instead of working with the Servlet JSP directly, so they started using struts in the place of Servlet JSP, especially to develop what? View and controller layer logics. So that's why in the year 2006, 2007, in that particular period, struts has been introduced, okay, to develop view layer and controller layer logics. And as usually what? USAB session bin for business logic, and Java class with JDBC for what? Persistence logic, and we have something called database software. We have called something called database software. Here is my view, here is my controller. Here is my model having what? Business logic. Here is my, come on, another model having what? Persistence logic. Here is my another model having what? Persistence logic. So this is the combination that went well for few days. But the problem with the JDBC based persistence logic is it will interact with the database software, but it does not support OR mapping persistence logic. That means it is not there as OR mapping persistence logic. What is this one? In JDBC persistence logic, we use SQL queries. Due to this data persistence logic is somewhat database software dependent, because some SQL queries are database software dependent. Next, persistence logic is not portable across the multiple database software. What persistence logic we have written by keeping one database software in mind cannot be used with what? Another database software. Next, even though we have data in the form of objects, we cannot use objects directly in the persistence operation. For example, insert query you take. Object is there, object is having student details, and I want to insert those details into table as a record. Can I pass object directly in the insert SQL query? No. That means I have to convert object data into simple values, then I have to pass them in what? Insert query. That means even though we are a Java programmer, object oriented programmer, in JDBC there is no provision to use objects directly in the persistence operation. We need to convert object data into what? Simple values in order to use them for what? Persistence operation. In order to use them for what? Persistence operations. Are you with me, boss? All right. So that's why people are actually looking for OR mapping persistence logic, where entire thing can be done with what? Objects. If you want to know more about OR mapping, please refer my Hibernate videos. There I talked what is OR mapping, what is object relational mapping, many things I talked there. So please refer that video so that you will get some basic idea about what? OR mapping. So people are looking for OR mapping where objects based persistence logic development is possible, so that our persistence logic becomes database software independent. But that is not possible with JDBC. It is possible with entity beans. But the problem with entity beans is they are heavyweight. So they started looking for lightweight ORM software, lightweight software that allows us to develop OR mapping persistence logic. So for that purpose, we got something called what? Hibernate. So that's why for few days people have gone for this combination. Struts, USAB session bin, next here what? Hibernate. So here is my database software, view controller. M for model, model having business logic. Another M for what is that? Model having what logic? Persistence logic. Having what? Persistence logic. So listen, Servlet JSPs are replaced with struts. JDBC is replaced with Hibernate. Not in every situation, some situations, okay. And they are using session bin to develop what? Business logic. So anyhow, USAB is heavyweight. They even started looking alternate for what? Session bin. And people have made USAB heaviness, even though it is not required, only because of middleware services. So that's why they also started searching for what? Alternate to session bean to get the middleware services in a lightweight environment. To get the middleware services in what? Lightweight environment. In this process, they found something called Spring Framework. What is that here? Spring Framework. So for few days, people have started this combination to develop MVC architecture application. Spring core module plus AOP. You know that in Spring so many modules are there. They have used Spring core module plus AOP. Then we have Hibernate as it is talking to database software. Hibernate as it is talking to database software. Once again see, view and controller here. Spring core module for developing business logic and AOP for applying middleware services. Applying what services? Middleware services. Yeah, model. This talks about what? Business logic. And AOP will be used to develop middleware services. Then here is my what? Persistence logic. So see the combination. Struts for view and controller logics. Spring for business logic. Hibernate for persistence logic. You don't believe around 2007, 2008, 2009, these are the hot cake things in the market. Okay, Struts, Spring, Hibernate. This is how people have used Struts, Spring, Hibernate together. Fine. But later, so many questions raised on Struts also, because Struts is given as invasive framework. That means once we develop the code in Struts, forever you have to keep in Struts only. There is no question of moving that code to another framework. And API designing also bad, and features also not there, and no proper upgradation from Apache also. Because of so many things, people got a thought. They decided to develop everything using what? Spring. Because Spring, so many modules are there. Though it is entered in the place of business logic development, replacing EasyB session bean. But later people started thinking to use Spring everywhere in all layers of MVC architecture based application development. In that process, okay, they have got some combination here. Spring MVC as alternate to Struts. Spring core plus AOP to develop business logic with middleware services. And here Spring JDBC to develop JDBC style persistence logic in Spring environment, or Spring ORM with Hibernate support to develop OR mapping persistence logic in Spring environment. This internal uses Hibernate or one or other ORM software, but most of the time they prefer using what? Hibernate. Once again observe, Spring MVC alternate to Struts dealing with what? View and controller layer logics. Spring core and AOP model layer representing what? Business logic with middleware services. Then this one for what? Persistence logic. So like this, see boss, here Spring ORM means definitely I can say internally Hibernate is also used, because Hibernate is most popular ORM framework. Na? See, if they want to develop plain JDBC style persistence logic in Spring JDBC, if they want to develop, okay, Hibernate style persistence logic in Spring, then you have to go for what? Spring ORM. And Spring core module and AOP is always there to develop what? Business logics and having middleware services support. Spring MVC is better alternate for what? Struts to develop view and controller layer logics. If I give popularity ratings, yes, number 1 is this, no doubt in that. Number 2, yes, for a few days this went well. And remaining all things are there knowledge sake, and they are a bit outdated also. So we need not to bother much on it. Okay, fine. So now let me give some conclusion on this discussion. I want to give list of view layer technologies. What are the technologies we can use in view layer? List of view layer technologies. We have HTML, we have JSP, we have Ajax, we have jQuery, we have AngularJS, we have XHTML, we have FreeMarker, we have Velocity, and many things, boss. All these are what? View layer technologies. Now let me give list of controller layer technologies. Controller layer, that means what are the technologies we can use to develop controller layer logics. Yes, we have servlet, and actually servlet filter is not a technology part of servlet, but generally we see either servlet as controller or servlet filter as what? Controller. Next one, let me give list of frameworks to develop view and model layer technologies. Model layer, view and controller layer, right? Controller layer logics. So let me give struts is there, Spring MVC is there, ADF is there, application development costliest, everything is possible through drag and drop, and web work is there. Next, Tapestry is there. Next, we have something called web work, Tapestry, Cocoon. So JSF, how can we forget JSF kind of thing, and etc. List of framework to develop view and controller layer logics. Let me give list of technologies and frameworks to develop model layer logics. List of technologies and frameworks to develop what? Model layer logics. Let's talk about what are the things we got to develop model layer. I want to specifically talk about persistence logic. Yes, let me give them. We have JDBC, we have Hibernate, we have Linq, we have IBTs, we have JDO, we have something called OJB, not brother and sister of EJB, it's a different one. We can use EJB entity beans. We have EJB entity beans. Then we have something called Spring JDBC. We got something called Spring ORM. All these are modules of Spring. Now let me give list of technologies and frameworks to develop model layer business logics. Model layer business logics. I would like to give list various technologies and frameworks that are there to develop what? Model layer business logics. Let's see. Java class with Java bean. Yes, sometimes we use ordinary Java class and Java beans also, right? And we use entity beans, EJB entity beans. Not entity beans, these are EJB session beans. EJB session beans, right? Then we have got something called RMA some extent. Then we can think about web services some extent. Generally web services for external services, but there also will place business logic kind of thing. But technically speaking, web service is for external service, okay. But overall is also represents what? Business logic. So Java class with Java bean, EJB session beans, RMI, web services, and many things. And what? Many things are there. So list of view layer technologies, right? List of controller layer technologies, nice. List of frameworks to develop view and way controller layer logics, nice. List of technologies that are there to develop model layer persistence logic. List of what? Technologies and framework to develop what? What is this? Model layer business logic. But in this list, I would like to even add, in this list I want to even add Spring Core. Sometimes people use a Spring Core, Spring JWE, and many other modules. Fine. So this is the discussion about the role of Spring Framework and Hibernate Framework in the development of what? MVC architecture based projects. So observe very carefully. Hibernate role is fixed, model layer persistence logic. But struts role is also fixed, view layer and controller layer logic. But Spring can be used in all layers of MVC architecture based project. That's why we generally say Hibernate is lake. like a small collection of water. So only for persistence logic. Struts is like something like fine, a river, because we can develop web applications. Then when it comes to Spring, it is like ocean. Using Spring we can develop what? All logics of all layers. Not only web applications, it can be used to develop enterprise application. It can be used to develop external services. It can be used to develop standalone application. It can be used to develop mailing application. That's what we call Spring is what? An ocean framework. That means it is having a lot of options to develop lots of different types of application, various kinds of applications. I hope you benefited with this session, because the main intention of this discussion is how can we use Spring and Hibernate in the MVC architecture based applications development. So thank you for watching this video.